Hello.
Hey Jonathan, how's it going?
Pretty good. I was just starting to check if I had the right place.
Excellent. Well, we're both here, so either we're both wrong or we're both right. So I don't know with both of us. I don't know which one I put my money on, but I guess we'll find out in a minute.
So
So
how you doing?
everything's good. I just like I said, I made a couple little tweaks to your PowerPoint. There's just a couple little typos, and I added our names to the title page. I hope that's okay. If we want to
Uh,
remove that, we can.
do you
Um,
remember? Because so there was the document that was on uh
the Google Drive.
yeah,
Hmm.
and I've been updating the document I have on my desktop because
Okay.
it has the right formatting and stuff. So I think
Oh,
I
I
transferred
got you.
something that you had. Uh
Yes. If you go into the Google Drive, um, you'll see if you go in the Google Drive, there's a new PUI job seeking work. It created copies as
oh,
Google
it made
Slides.
copies.
Yeah, it made copies. I don't think I could overwrite yours so um the new copy was most recently edited by me at 11:55 a.m. if you're looking to open one of those up
Um,
in the drive.
I'm only seeing the one.
Hmm. Wondering if there's an issue with sharing here. Let me see. I'll show you what I'm seeing here so you have an idea. So when I open up the drive, PUI job workshop, um, you're gonna see
Oh, okay, no.
those new docs. I don't know, maybe if once again I don't have access to maybe they're sharing share. Oh, let me share it with both you guys.
Uh,
Apparently I didn't do that. Anyone with the link, and I'll hit done. That should try hitting refresh. See if
I
that app
yeah.
updates the access. So,
Um, but I don't see which one is. There we go.
okay. I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing my screen then. Can you see
Yeah, no, I've got it now.
okay.
Um, okay, I think the one I have on my desktop, um, okay, that is so weird.
Hmm.
Why is it doing this to me? Because I spell checked mine.
Okay. I wonder if it's an old version. Hmm.
Well, no, because mine is telling me that application only has one P in it, which I know is wrong.
Which we know is wrong. Yeah, that's
Hold on.
the wonders of AI.
Why is my computer telling me? What was the other typos that you saw?
Just there was one other little thing, institute, I think, on, let me see, what slide was it? Something,
The institute, I think I caught.
you got that. And then, yeah, just application, just the two P's. That was the only two things. Other than that, you're good. So,
That is so weird because in that box where it says steps to a successful application,
mm-hmm.
it's telling me the two P's is wrong.
Hmm.
Look right next door where it says application essentials. It's
And
telling me
that's
this is correct.
correct. Hmm. Interesting.
That is weird.
Huh.
With the institute I caught. Okay, so that should all be okay then.
Okay. Yeah, we're good. Other than that, those were the only things I saw that really gave me any concern. So I'm not too worried here outside of that. Everything else looked pretty good. So
No,
yeah.
the room is filling up.
The room's filling up. Yeah, we're having a very public preparing things here. And our third, I see Chengele and Shoshana are also here. So hello.
Hi.
Oh yeah, Shoshana, thanks for helping out.
No problem. What I'm here.
Mhm.
What do you guys think? Give people another couple of minutes to log in?
Yeah.
It's a good idea. Give them 5 minutes or 3 to 5 minutes here. Should be good. Yeah. Didn't the webinar? Yeah, webinar technically starts at 2. Yeah. So we'll give them a couple more minutes to come in and we should be good. We're good.
Oh, today is definitely a Friday of Fridays.
Friday afternoon. Yep. And in my PhD program, we had a seminar series that met on Friday afternoon as well. So I think it might have been the same time, 2 o'clock. So
We always had our in grad school, we had our graduate student seminar on Friday. So all the graduate students from the different programs got together. Well, not all the different programs, only this is the biology ones. Got together on Fridays
mhm.
and featured some upperclassmen.
Okay. Yeah, we had a department wide one, and there are always a couple of the older faculty members who would, nod off about 15 minutes in, almost without without any sort of you know deviation from the plan. Very, very regular occurrence. Same time, they'd nod off and they'd wake up in time to ask a fantastic question though, which always amazed me.
I was
Were
just
they
gonna
really
ask.
sleeping?
Aquí tampoco.
So, mhm. Okay.
Yeah, I always wondered if they had those questions prepped beforehand,
That's what I'm not sure about. Yeah, that's always what I wonder. Yeah. So
just to add to the mystique.
mhm. That's what it's all about when you're senior faculty, right? The mystique factor. So okay. All right. So I guess do we want to try to get things started here for everybody? At this point, what do you guys think, guys and girls?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, let's go ahead. So welcome everybody. We put this together as sort of an offshoot from a workshop that we had at the ASPB meeting in Honolulu. We were thinking about some of the questions that popped up there, people that are in graduate school, people who are in postdocs that are interested in PUIs, but maybe coming from R1s and not having necessarily the information that they need. And one of the reasons we wanted to do this is if you look at the job market right now, it looks like about, what was the numbers we heard? Like 80% of some of the faculty positions that are actually available right now are at PUIs and similar types of institutions. So there's a really huge sort of market out there for people for applying for jobs. But if you're coming from R1s and you don't have an experience with PUIs, sometimes it's hard to know what you're looking at, right? There's no real cookie cutter, primarily undergraduate institute. We encompass liberal arts colleges, community colleges, regional comprehensives. Sometimes there's satellite campuses. There's MSIs, many of the HBCUs. So there's really sort of a huge sort of a huge PUI market out there, and they're going to have their different nuances. They're going to be a little bit different. And so we put this together, and I'm going to share my screen real quick for just a moment so that we'll see. That's not going to work. Let's see if this is going to work. So I can't see what you guys are seeing right now. Do you see my slide filling the screen, or do you see my presenter view filling the screen?
We can see your slide.
You can see your slide. Okay. So we've kind of put this together. I'm Jonathan Fitzgerald. Last year I was chair of the PUI steering committee at ASPB. I have with me Chingeli Barta, who's also currently on the steering committee. Do you want to introduce yourself, Chingeli?
Hello, everyone. I'm Chengela Barta. I'm a professor at Missouri Western State University, PUI institution. I have been here this is my 13th year, so for quite a while now. And everyone, welcome. I'm very happy to be here and talk about this very, very interesting topic on how to find PUI jobs and how to successfully apply for PUI jobs.
And then we also have William Saracen, who was an attendee at the workshop that we held. And it was kind of his idea and his impetus that led us to putting this whole workshop together. So I'll let William introduce himself.
Yeah. So thank you for that introduction, Jonathan. So for all you, my name is William Saracen. I graduated from University of Kentucky with a PhD in plant physiology back in 2017. After that, I moved directly into a assistant professor job at a small religious liberal arts college, Ave Maria University, which has about 1,200 students in Southwest Florida. And after that, about a year and a half ago, I had an opportunity at Penn State Lehigh Valley, one of our Commonwealth campuses, part of the larger Penn State ecosystem that happens to be very close to my hometown. So I had the good fortune of actually being able to go home and be closer to my family and move up in my career at the same time. So I'm definitely junior faculty. So I'll be providing an insight of what I've seen and my experiences as from that perspective, as a job seeker in today's market. How do you market your skills as a plant biologist to succeed in applying at these primarily undergraduate institutions?
And so what we have in store for you today, we've kind of broken this up into sort of 4 topics. And William's going to be helping us kick off with finding the job opportunities and researching the schools, because he's more closer to sort of that stage of the job process. And so he'll lead that. But then what we plan to do with each of these sections is kind of give just a short little set of tips and things to look out for. Then we're going to open up the conversation for people that are working at PUIs, if there's anything that they want to add, and then we'll open up for questions. And then we'll move on to the next section. And then Chingela and I are going to be looking at more of the, since we've been sitting on job committees and search committees and have been spending a lot of time over the past few years screening through applications and doing the interviews, we're going to focus more on the application essentials and the interviewing process. And so that's kind of what we have in store for you today. So I'll go ahead and I'll stop sharing my screen and let William talk about finding job openings.
Yep. All right. So thank you again, Jonathan. So basically, folks, I don't have a ton of visuals prepared, but I do have some links and some information I can share. I'm happy to put that in the group chat here, or Shoshana, I'm sure, can share that with everybody after the seminar as well. So one of the most important things, of course, is searching for and finding relevant opportunities. It is really the challenge. Because it really is a fire hose out there, right? There are dozens of forums that you can search for academic jobs from, and being able to interpret those in an effective way is going to really help narrow your focus to places where you have the best chance of actually landing a position. So sort of a little bit of advice I have from my perspective is, first of all, when it comes to searching online, there are, of course, dozens of databases out there. Fortunately, once again, you can easily get lost in them and sort of, get off track. But I'll say there are a few good ones that I would definitely recommend that are very central in higher education. So the first one you want to focus on is there's job forums through InsideHigherEd.com. And that's sort of a central repository that almost all of these schools will funnel their call for applications into. So that is a good spot. If you're looking, of course, for more specific application portals to plant biology, we have our own through the ASPB website as well, which I think Jonathan can share more about. The Plante website has some links for our applications that for members and that are interested in recruiting plant biologists specifically. And a third source I want to also bring to everybody's attention, once again, I can include links that Shoshana can share later, is through the what's called the TRI Society. So the Crop Science Society of America and their associated societies post a great deal of crop science oriented and plant science related careers as well. And those applications tend to be very specific. The skills we have as plant biologists are very translatable to many of those positions. But once again, not all of those, some of those are more oriented towards R1s. What do you do when you find a PUI posting is what we're going to look at here. So once again, sometimes you have to remember these PUIs are going to post very broad invitations, perhaps for a general biologist or a molecular biologist, for example, are very common postings at PUIs. So you might think, well, they're not looking for a plant biologist. I don't know if I'm the right person for this job. But the two jobs I've applied for and successfully landed, they weren't looking for a plant biologist, or they didn't think they were looking for one either. Okay. So my sort of trick here is, as you go through these databases, and this becomes a little intensive when they say that finding a job is a full-time job in itself. When you're looking at postings for institutions, I actually go, especially if it's an invitation for a general biologist or a molecular biologist, I go onto their faculty webpage and I actually start browsing through their faculty members to see where their expertise is. And in general, most of these smaller departments, once again, may not know they're looking for a plant biologist, or they may not have one. So you would bring some complementarity to a department that doesn't have a plant specialist per se, a plant physiologist. And of course, our skills are very much translatable. Most of us have a good deal of molecular biology research and experience here. So my advice is to go through, especially at these PUIs, these websites. You have to get very in-depth and granular, going to the faculty web pages, seeing the profiles, and identifying some of those gaps. Because a lot of these postings, they don't know they're looking for a plant biologist, but we have skills that are definitely going to help us stand out against some of those more traditional generic postings, if you will. So that's kind of the little insights and tips that I'd like to share there in terms of actually locating and finding jobs online. So Jonathan or Chengeli, did you want to add any comments? When you guys like post a position, do you add a little more detail about what you may post in those other types of roles? Something along those lines
So
from your perspective.
I can pick this up. So, very frequently, what you see in the postings and what at least my institution has been doing is, by the time we are looking for somebody to fill a position, we have narrowed it down pretty much to the coursework that needs to be filled by
Mhm.
that position. So, in generally in the postings, it appears that the expectation would be that this new hire would be teaching, let's say, organismal biology and ecology and courses in their area of expertise. Now, for example, a position in organismal biology that formulates an organismal biology course with an ecology course may as well just be a plant biology person. So very frequently, as William said, the actual model organism or the system that the person is working with is often not as important as some of these areas that their expertise has to cover. So, for example, our ecologist right now is a vertebrate biologist, but our organismal biologist is also a plant biologist, and I'm a cellular biologist, and I'm also a plant biologist. So we actually have two plant biologist people on our department. So some departments might have that expertise represented, but in a different area of that plant biology. So often, if you have a larger department and there is capability, then don't be discouraged by the fact that you look at their faculty listings and you find that, oh, they already have a plant biologist. Because you would be filling a very, very specific gap at this point. And another thing that I wanted to add to this is that sometimes departments don't exactly know what they are doing and what they are looking for specifically. And William mentioned this, and sometimes you find very weird positions advertised, like and this is not plant biology, but let's say immunology and animal physiology and something else, virology, right? So those would be the skills that need to be brought in, at least one of them, but that's casting a larger, you know, um, variability. So don't shy away from positions that sound not as much specific for your area of expertise as well. And I would like to add to this that there is one more good resource, and I know my institution, for example, always posts their job ads to the Chronicle of Higher Education.
Another good
That
one.
might be another one that you might want to look at. You'll find all sorts of job advertisements there. Of course, it's not specific to PUIs, but many PUI institutions post there exclusively. And sometimes institution websites, like just looking at an institution's website, you could find postings as well. But that requires a little bit more work to actually, pick out a couple of institutions that you might be interested in and see whether they have any job posting at the time when you're looking.
Hey, the only thing that I'd kind of like to add to that too is something that William mentioned before. Sometimes people in plant biology tend to be more cross-trained than other disciplines. In fact, in what you'll find a lot of times in the liberal arts setting is that intro biology is sort of split into a cellular molecular semester and then an organismal semester. And the only people that I've seen that can actually teach in both have been plant biologists, because even though we might be more molecularly trained, we're still dealing with whole organisms, and that gives us that sort of organismal bent. So it really is good to play to the strengths of a plant biologist is being sort of, organismal and molecular at the same time. That can really help out. And so William kind of called me out about websites too. So I'm just going to share something real quick. And this is, can you guys see the ASPB website now? So this is ASPB, and it has a whole page of plant science careers and a plant job center. But no matter, whatever your favorite society is, you can usually find job postings. So I'm an Arabidopsis person, and I can look under, TARE, and I can see a bunch of job postings that are there as well. So most of the society pages that you would normally frequent might have some available resources for finding jobs. But again, they mentioned Chronicles, and yeah, that we always post in Chronicles as well. So with that, like, you know, we invited people from other PUIs. So if there's people that are working currently at PUIs who'd like to add something to this, feel free. Now would be the opportunity. Otherwise, if people that are sort of on that sort of seeking a job right now have any questions about, you know, the sort of finding jobs aspect of this, please feel free to ask, unmute and ask questions.
Yeah, I'll also add as well, if you do think of a question and you want to post it in the chat, I'm monitoring the group chat as well, and we can get to your question as we get some pauses as well. So feel free to post your questions to the chat itself, if you don't want to kind of interrupt our presentation, and we'll find a time to work in those questions before we wrap things up. So either chat, or you can do the hand raise gesture through Zoom, and we can pick you up that way as well.
So I'm Dr. Jeff Thornsberry. I'm a department chair about 40 minutes north of Dr. Barta at Northwest Missouri State. Hi. Anyway, I'm a maze geneticist and dabble a bit in physiology as well. I just wanted to chime in and say that everything that you all have said are right in line with what we do typically as part of our search process, that we're posting the Chronicle, that we're going to, you know, post on inside higher ed or higher ed jobs. There's a, you know, and then we typically, if we can convince our HR folks, we'll post on more specialty boards in particular areas. But I would, again, encourage folks to branch themselves out, especially at PUIs. You're gonna, you know, we don't know necessarily what we're looking for, and we can juggle things around and make all sorts of different sort of people fit into our department. You know, I don't know if other department chairs or folks leading search committees are encountering this issue, but we've seen a pretty steady decline in the number of applicants that we're receiving. Even though 80%, as you said, of the job openings that are out there are at PUIs like ourselves. So figuring out a way to combat that is kind of why I wanted to try to listen in and in today and see what we can do at our end. But anyway, I'll cut myself off there.
No, it's true. When I originally applied to the position I'm at, they were looking for a developmental biologist who could teach photosynthesis. And I thought that was kind of a bizarre mix, but you know, I convinced them that plants do undergo development just as much as animals did, and that you might as well go and find a person to teach photosynthesis.
Okay. All right, great. So I don't see any questions in the chat. I guess we can move. So kind of searching the job boards, we kind of discussed that. We want to move on to our sort of next section here. Next thing we want to address here.
So the next one, and I'll go ahead and pop these slides up real quick. Let's see. So if I do that. So hopefully you guys are seeing the slides. So the next thing is this idea of researching the schools. And this is kind of critical because, like I said, different PUIs have different sort of flavors to them. And you really want to look at the school, see kind of where you might fit in, and what you might expect. And a couple of things that you want to be looking for, you know, the location of the school, the size of the school, and the resources that are available. And like I mentioned, where do you fit in, right? So one of the differences between like an R1 that might have a whole plant program or a couple of plant programs, or, you know, bring together plant people from different programs, in a small liberal arts college like ourselves, you might have the geneticist and the cell biologist and the molecular biologist. And so although we're a good group and we work well together, everybody kind of has a more basic specialty. And so you want to see what the structure of the faculty look like there, and where you might be offering something new and unique. And then again, I'm gonna sort of let William take over on this part.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, you're going to want to do your own research for a couple reasons. And number one, you want to make sure you're going to be a good fit for the institution. That's an important thing. The fit has to work both ways. Okay. I know it can feel like as a job seeker, you just have to get anything you can cling on to, and then you'll make it work from there. But the reality is you're going to thrive if you're somewhere you feel like you match the school's goals and objectives. So one thing I also suggest is looking into the department. Of course, you can find all this information online, what types of resources they have, what types of equipment they have, what types of lab facilities. But I think it's also important, look at the broader university. What is their mission statement? What are they, can you find some information? Are they focused on, are they trying to build their STEM programs at the time? Are they more liberal arts focused towards the humanities and the social sciences? All these are important things to consider your fit in the broader university as well. And doing this research, you're going to find out how big the student body is, and you're going to learn what the composition of students is. You're going to learn about their backgrounds. You're going to know what type of students the institution's targeting. And once again, as a faculty member, you want to know who you're going to be working with as students and colleagues and what their general drive and their objectives are. Okay, so I think reading the mission statement of the university is an important one. Many universities have land grant driven statements where they want to engage people. For example, like Penn State's a land grant. So we're trying to engage members of the Commonwealth and improve the quality of life for members of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So that's something you will ultimately are going to want to write into your application. The last institution I was at, Ave Maria University, was a small Catholic liberal arts college, and they were concerned more with the religious mission of the university. If you look at minority serving institutions like HBCUs, their mission is going to be driven towards providing opportunities for underrepresented minorities in STEM and other positions. I think it's also important for your own sake, find a mission you're passionate about, and it's going to feel like a natural fit. These are things you already live and profess, right? That's what we want to do. So if we're already going towards an institution that matches our passions, the fit, when you go on the interview, it's going to feel much more natural going to a place like that. And we can't always be picky about the mission statement we choose, but we should definitely do some research into what they're looking to find. Another thing we can look into, and actually Joanna has a question in the chat, and I think we can start to address this now. She says, can you provide an overview of the PUI positions regarding tenure track and research teaching load dynamics? In general, this will be in the job postings, but you can also sometimes find information about this on the university's website as well. So I think we're going to get into this in a little bit, right, Jonathan, as far as the—
Yeah, I saw that question pop up, and I was going to comment that just when you're doing your initial research in a place, it's hard to figure out sometimes like what the requirements for tenure track are, what the teaching loads are, because those aren't things you necessarily find on the website. But when you start to do the application process, and especially the interview process, those are things that you want to really focus on.
Yes,
those are really important considerations. The best you can do at this stage, when you're still sort of deciding who you want to apply to, I would say look at the faculty bios, because you can look at their publication records, and that's going to give you a sense of the sort of research character of the organization. Because some of the PUIs are going to be more research intensive, some are going to be less research intensive. And you can tell the ones that are more research intensive because they will feature that on their web pages. You'll see mentions of the undergraduates going to conferences. You'll see the publication list of the PIs. It should become apparent as you're looking through the faculty. But keep that question in mind, because that's going to be critical when we get you to the interview stage.
Yeah, we'll circle back, Joanna. Yeah, we'll get to that in a moment. Yep, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, you can learn a lot from going on the websites, and I think that will help you prepare some of your application materials too. I think that's an important thing, that you start weaving those concepts, what's on the website, what the university emphasizes, into your statements, whether it be your cover letter, your research statement, your whatever it happens to be. So yeah, I think that's important for that initial research stage as well. And Chingele, did you have anything else to add or incorporate as well?
I think you covered most of it because, yeah, so the fit itself is absolutely a must. It's a must. It's something that, for example, and again, we'll come back to this one when we talk about the interview, but your committee and your department, future department, is going to look for as well. So you have to understand the institution that you're applying to and its people and the student population to the maximum. I think that's part of the entire process from search. So the moment when you searched, you found the position, then you actually have to very, very carefully research the institution and make sure that it's a good fit for what you're hoping for. And here is my example. I actually came from a fully research background, so I haven't had much I had teaching experience before, but mostly in a laboratory and teaching students techniques. I also had a degree in science education, which I never practiced with, because the moment when I finished college, I entered into my PhD program and then postdoc and then a research position. So if you're in those shoes, and there are many people who actually do this transition, we have 3 people of this kind in our department right now who came from full research positions as well. That, you know, if the institution is looking, for example, specifically for research expertise, if they are more research intensive, then you should not be rejecting a posting of a PUI if you're interested in working with for a PUI institution, because your research expertise will be looked upon very positively, and that might be the thing that they are actually looking for. So the fit, there is a very fine balance right there, and PUI institutions differ in between each other, and we will come back to this again about the just related to the question as well that Joanna asked, that they are different enough that there will be different teaching loads, different proportions between your engagement in research, teaching, and service in different places. So you have to understand that from the get-go when you're applying.
And I can kind of give an example from my own experience. So I was never, I never attended a liberal arts school. So I was mostly R1 for most of my undergraduate, my postdoc, everything like that. And so when I was, you know, at the Institute of Singapore, you know, we had like 16 Arabidopsis labs. And we had joint meetings and just, you know, tons of people that were into Arabidopsis, huge greenhouses. I was always around Arabidopsis people. Prior to that, when I was working in Lyon, France, we had a couple of Arabidopsis groups, but still a whole like department of plant biologists. So everybody I was around every day was all plant biologists. Here, for most of the time I've been here, I was maybe one of 1 or 2 plant people at any given time. And so that's part of the reason I spent a lot of time, you know, working with ASPB and stuff like that. So I still find my own networks of plant people. But what keeps me engaged and excited here at my college is that even though we're all, you know, I'm the only plant person, everybody kind of has their own field or their own organism that they're studying. We're all very into this idea of course-based undergraduate research experiences and doing undergraduate research. And that sort of curricular development has kind of kept us as a closely knit group working together on that aspect and getting opinions from people that are in various different fields. And then how do we take the strengths of these different fields and put them together so that we develop these undergraduate researchers that are really broadly trained. To me, that makes this position really exciting. And that's something I couldn't do in some of these R1 places. Jeffrey, did you want to add something?
Just as far as like the, you know, the drive home the idea of where you want to apply some of that background information regarding, you know, information you can find about individual programs or individual schools. It's the number one thing that we're going to look for in a cover letter. So whenever we get to, I'm sure you all will be talking about the application package itself, but if I can, if in those first couple paragraphs of that cover letter, it's clear to me that that applicant doesn't really understand what the purpose of our program is, they're going to the bottom of the pile right off the bat. They could be a great scientist. They might have the background that would benefit us, but if they don't understand who we are and what we are, they're going to go to the bottom of the stack. And it's probably going to pop up in any Zoom interview that we do before we invite people to campus as well. So just kind of front load that bit of the conversation.
And that's a great segue to our next topic. But before we do that, is there any questions that people have about the finding your fit aspect? Another thing you'll learn if you go to a teaching school. How long is that awkward moment of silence to allow people to contemplate the questions that they're going to ask? We've all gotten so used to it. A long time.
It becomes a standoff sometimes too. It's a way to show your students that you're the one running the class. I can do this all day, guys.
All right, so let me go back to the slides again real quick. So hopefully you guys are seeing application essentials. So now we're moving. So Jeffrey gave us a great segue into this. The application process, again, like Jeffrey pointed it out really well with the idea of the cover letter, but also there's particular things that we might be looking for that they might not necessarily be looking for in an R1. And so I'm highlighting sort of three things here: the cover letter, your research statement, and your teaching statement. And again, different schools are going to be different. So, other people will comment on this as well. But like Jeffrey says, so the cover letter is actually fairly important because we are looking for that specific connection to the institution, and a lot of times we're getting applications from people that are at R1s, or you can tell that they're purely research focused. And we can kind of sniff that out in the cover letter because the cover letter doesn't mention why they want to come here. And again, like I said, we're kind of a tight-knit group focused on undergraduate research. And so if we don't get that sense from the cover letter, or that you've looked at the webpage, or that you know something about us, right, then it's really easy for us to kind of feel like, okay, this person is just practicing with us. The research statement. Now, again, different schools are going to have different requirements for research. But in the application, you almost want to think about this as a teaching moment, because at least, for some of us, your research statement is the thing that you've been working on for the past 5 or 6 years. And my expectation is that if you're going to come here and be a great teacher, then you should be able to convey to me the sort of big picture idea, the importance of your research. So I should read your research statement, and I'm really looking at it not just about the research that you're doing. Did you have the right controls? Do you know your methodology? I'm reading this as sort of, is this person going to be able to teach a complicated subject with relative ease to somebody maybe not in the field or doesn't have that background? The other thing that's going to be really important about that research statement, especially a school that does undergraduate research, is how are undergraduates going to be involved? And that's something that's going to be in a lot of the PUIs, since we're working entirely with undergraduates a lot of the time. We want to make sure that somebody's thought about this, that they're not working with an army of postdocs, that they may not have these giant sequencing facilities, that they're going to be, in a position where they're working with 2, 3, maybe 4 undergraduates each semester. And have they thought about how they're going to confine their research goals so that they can effectively produce results with the undergraduate population? And then finally, the teaching statement is something that is in most applications to PUIs, and that's going to be an important component to it. The one piece of advice that I would give people when I'm reading these teaching statements, I definitely get ones that's like a teaching philosophy that reads like things that they read recently that sound good on paper, as opposed to somebody who's tried things and have sort of self-assessed their own experiences. And that becomes, in most cases, a stronger candidate. Somebody who's, has a goal for their class, has attempted some of the things that they've thought about, but then has self-assessed their teaching and then come up with new strategies. And if I see that in the teaching statement, then I think that here's a person who's not only going to be able to hone their craft more when they get here, but maybe is more open to mentoring. So that's sort of my take on the components of the application. The other thing is sometimes you want to ask yourself, are you ready yet? Or how do you make yourself sound ready? So most institutes, you might hear this idea, are looking for some evidence of some trajectory of success. So based on the teaching that you've done, based on the research that you've done, they're looking if you've established some trajectory that, 5 years down the line, are you going to be ready for your tenure? Are you going to be ready to hand in a tenure packet and be successful on it? And so one of the best ways to make yourself look ready is to incorporate that into some of your application. So thinking about the 5-year plan, what are you coming in with? How are you going to start your new position? Where do you want to be sort of at the end of 5 years? What's your trajectory? If you can establish that trajectory in your research statement, in your teaching statement, then it's much easier for the people reading these applications to kind of feel comfortable that you are establishing this trajectory, that you're going to be successful come tenure time. And again, we've talked about this before, but plant people tend to be cross-trained organismally and molecularly. So what strengths can you bring to the table? And can you highlight those strengths, especially if you've looked at the department and how you might fit into the department? So let me stop the share. And Chengeli, you've also served on job search committees.
On
You have
plenty of
other things you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, so I would say that the cover letter is absolutely, probably, in my opinion, one of the most important pieces of your application, because that is what at least I and many of my colleagues probably read first. And the cover letter essentially has to, in a very compact format, be able to tell the audience the content of your application, what you have done, how you have done it, what your plans are, how do you do your research, how do you integrate the students, and especially how does that connect to your teaching and your planned or your long-term and short-term teaching activities as well, and what your curricular plans are going to be, and how you see yourself fit into the institution. So the cover letter is one of those pieces that you have to, if I would be reading nothing else from your application, the cover letter has to tell me essentially all of that. Now, if you look at the research statement itself, you also have to keep in mind that the audience, as Jonathan said earlier, is going to be of a varying expertise, because again, you might have perhaps another plant biologist in the department, but that's about it. So my recommendation is don't enter into the nitty-gritty details, but focus on the broader picture, on why this is important, what you're doing, how you are going to do, especially have a plan, and this is based on the research that you are doing ahead of time about the institution. What are the resources that are already there that you can use? It also is a good idea to think ahead if there is some specific need for your research, and if it's not there at the institution and not available nearby, then have plans, for example, to apply for extramural funding. So having plans, having that 5-year plan and potentially even a shorter term, a 1-year plan that comes through the statement is a very, very important piece of it. The students, how you would engage students, how you would recruit students, which kind of student population you're thinking to involve into the research, which kind of skills your students might learn throughout the process of doing research with you or being in your classroom. Those are very important things to incorporate into those statements as well. Yet you have to be brief enough so you don't want to enter into the unnecessary details. And just keep in mind that PUI institutions tend to look for the most part for teacher scholars. And that means that there has to be a interconnection, or they are hoping to see a very good connection that comes through already through the application materials. And then if you make it to the interview stage, then that's very important to convey how you would use your own research to inform your teaching and how your teaching could also inform your research. So I think those aspects are really, really important to be represented in a compact application package as well. Coursework wise, for example, make plans in your teaching statement about where you would see yourself fit in teaching, which kinds of courses. Obviously, the job ad might give you some ideas about, the department is looking to fill in this specific need. You have to fit that, but do you have other plans how you can add additional strengths to the department in teaching, how you could introduce potentially new classes of the interest for the specific programs that department has, how you would fit into that department's activity, how could you contribute in forwarding the curriculum and therefore providing more opportunities for students. So some of these aspects are absolutely necessary to come through, and you have to be genuine and passionate. Typically that is how to say, that has to come through as well. Very frequently through applications, one can actually feel that this person is only applying for this job, doesn't really want this job, doesn't really want to come to our institution, but it's doing it for whatever other reason. It's just a job, and they are on the market for a job, any job. And you have to genuinely want it, and you have to genuinely convey that to the search committee.
If I can add on to that, one of the tricks that I've developed, because you spend a lot of time in a postdoc, writing things for a very specific narrow audience. And so when I write these things that are for more general audiences, I always give it to somebody who's not a plant biologist and say, hey, read this. Are you getting the main points? Does it sound exciting to you? Is it something that's engaging to you? And then once you can kind of get the non-plant person to do that, then you're sort of ready for the general audience you might find at a PUI.
That's a good point.
Jeffrey, did you want to add something? I know you've been on search committees.
I'm on too many right now, to be honest. So, again, I think Dr. Barta gave a really good summary there that because we are teaching institutions, in that cover letter, making it clear how you could contribute to the curriculum, whether it's the listed classes in the ad. And the other thing that I would encourage folks to think about is maybe you haven't actually taught a class in that particular subject area yourself, but if your research in some way has kind of allowed for you to dabble in that area so that you can check a few boxes, or you can, give us the idea that you could grow or you can adapt. some basic teaching techniques, and you've got enough background to make yourself dangerous in that area, so to speak, then I think that that's definitely something you want to point out in that cover letter. Again, I would recommend moving some of those things towards the front end of the cover letter. Most folks coming from R1s are going to talk right off the bat about their research, and they're going to hit that hard and heavy in the first paragraph or two. Whenever you might want to have two basic cover letters that you've got in the background, one that you're going to be sending to R1 institutions and one that you're going to be sending out to PUIs, and make sure that you don't get the two confused. So.
And always double check that you put the right institute name on the right cover letter.
Ah.
I don't know how many times we see that mistake.
Yeah.
So any follow-up questions on the application?
Yeah, from my perspective, I'll add, as a job searcher, sometimes you're in a hurry, you're in a crunch, and you want to slide in one more application, right before the deadline. And playing Mad Libs with the names of the institutions is something that the committee members can always sniff out. So once again, it's the concept that you need to put your time in doing this background research so you can put together an impactful cover letter, an impactful research statement that is tailored specifically to the institution you're looking for. It is effort, it takes time, but your chances are near zero if you are not making individual applications for each institution. Very important to take the time to do it.
So let's move on, since time's getting really short. Let's move on to that last section. And so when you get called in for that interview, and what I have here are just some things to kind of be prepared for. So usually you'll get some sort of Zoom interview or phone interview first. And the kind of questions you want to be prepared for, at least these are kind of common questions. Describing a course and your expertise with a lab component. So they're going to have you say, how are you going to teach this thing? Or what are you going to incorporate in the lab section to help teach these things? So you want to be prepared for that, so you can give sort of concrete sort of examples of experiences that the students are going to have. They're going to ask about your desire to teach at a liberal arts college. You're going to typically get questions about diversity and equity. And what I would recommend is stick to real experiences. Like, be prepared for that. Think about experiences that you've had where you've been able to demonstrate some sort of, working in diversity and equity, or a challenge that you faced, or something that you found in one of your own classes. And definitely the idea of how you're going to pull off your research project within the limitations of that institute. You want to be prepared for that type of question. Now, in the interview, they're also going to ask you to ask them questions. And this goes back to what Joanne was talking about before, or what she was asking about before. You can actually be a much stronger interviewer, or at least have a more lasting memory if you're asking really good questions, because asking really good questions says that you know something about sort of what you're getting into at a PUI. So asking specifically what the tenure requirements are, because it's going to be different at different places. The amount of papers you need to publish, or the type of research expectations, or how do you demonstrate excellent teaching, things like that. What type of support does the institute have for research? Do they give funds for your classes? Do they give stipends? What are the startup funds that you're able to have? You want to talk about teaching load, and you want to be ask them very specifically what type of teaching load, what are the teaching expectations, because those vary widely. In fact, in some places, you have a lecture and a lab together, that counts as one involvement. But in some places, those are separate involvements. So even a question like that is really important, because if they say you have a 3-3, so 3 teaching involvements in each semester, and the difference between having the lab or not having the lab could double your workload. So you want to make sure that you're clear on the teaching load. And I think this was brought up before, if your research or anything that you do has special needs, like special pieces of equipment, things like that, you want to bring that up during these early interviews so that they can start thinking about, if they don't have this piece of equipment, is it something nearby? Is it something you can use? Do they have money to supply something like that? The next part is that then what happens when you do your in-person interviews? And it's fairly common to have to do two sorts of demonstrations. So having one talk that's primarily about your research, and then also potentially doing a teaching demo. And remember, this research talk, if this is a primarily undergraduate institute, what a lot of times they're looking for is your ability to convey this complicated research that you've been working on for 5 years to an undergraduate audience that might be in their introductory biology class. So being able to break down what you're working on so that a general audience can understand, follow what you're doing, and see the importance of the work. And with the teaching demo, different people might have different opinions on that, but you just want to make sure you have a nice encapsulated, 20 to 30 minutes where you're teaching something. You don't have to go into a lot of what I would normally do or what I would like to do. Just have this sort of encapsulated moment that you think sort of shows your strengths as an educator. And keep in mind, you're continuously being evaluated. Even when you go out to dinner, even when you're having, your different interviews and talks with people. And at the end, you want to make sure that you get things in writing and know what are the resources that are available to you. So I'm going to stop there and let others kind of add to that.
Yeah, I'd like to go specifically to Joanna's question. So, Jonathan, you did mention teaching loads can be very different at different institutions, and the way they count different classes is important to note. So I'll give a good example of this. At Ave Maria, a 3-hour lab counted as 2 teaching credits. It counted as 2 hours of teaching. When I came here to Penn State, the 3-hour lab counts as 3 contact hours. So the 3-hour lab here counts for 3 credits. So 12 credits of teaching here at Penn State could look dramatically different than 12 credits of teaching at another institution. And that's where just getting some clear expectations, especially in STEM, where there are these lab courses, how do they weigh the labs versus the lectures? That can become very important. The difference of the time you're spending with 2-credit labs versus 3-credit labs, even though they're the same amount of hours in the classroom, could have a big impact on how much time you're actually spending teaching, even if they say it's the same credit load. So those types of nuanced questions can be very important in determining what is my true teaching load, and like Jonathan was saying, those teaching units are important to get defined, because many universities use different systems for defining their teaching units. So yeah, Joanna, I would say, coming back to your question, getting that clear for you so you understand how much time you're really spending in the classroom and the lab teaching classroom are important. Other thing, yeah, at a PUI, a lot of us faculty members end up teaching our own labs. It's very different than a lot of R1s. And R1, a lot of times, right, a TA teaches the lab. Very common. I teach all of my freshman labs here at Penn State. I teach the labs, I teach the lecture, I do everything. So that's another adjustment you might want to think about as well, is what is your engagement? You may not have a TA to help with grading either. The whole class can be on you in terms of the prep to start to finish. So those are other questions you can ask about how a course you teach is impactful.
Any tips for a 5 to 10 minute teaching demo on Zoom?
Wow.
That's the question from Brandy. In a 5 to 10 minute teaching demo, you're only going to be able to get one concept across. And so you want to make sure that you're sort of encapsulating that, as tightly as possible. You don't want to go onto a large tangent. You want to make sure that you're introducing like a big question, You want to follow up that question with maybe a specific experimental result, tie that into the lesson that's supposed to be learned, and then do some follow-up assessment with the students. But you want that to be dynamic, but not a lot of content. I don't know. Would you guys agree?
I do. And I would say that, for example, for your teaching demo and teaching presentation, it's always a good idea to have some applied component in it. Don't just lecture, but use applied learning, because applied learning is very important in the classroom, and students learn much better if they have hands-on activities. So try to, even when you're teaching, when you're thinking of your teaching demo, just think of it as if, okay, I'm going into the classroom. This is what I am going to do, right? So you don't need to demonstrate only, pure theoretical knowledge, but you need the practicalities that will show the audience, which is your interviewers, and possibly that there could be students in the audience as well invited to your interview. So you need to show them that this is exactly how I would do it in a classroom. Right.
Yeah.
And you might get in ahead of time, for example, topics or a topic recommendation as to, okay, use a topic, use this topic. Topic could be this narrow, or it could be a very broad range of topics. So always think about how you approach how you would approach that in a classroom. And can I add one more thing to the the research presentation? So one of the things that's really important to keep in mind is that you are not only presenting your past research. You do have to be able to show that you have a plan with very specific goals, at least for up until a certain amount of time, 3-5 years, that demonstrate that you can actually do research that can be adapted, can be broken down into smaller segments, and can be adapted to an undergraduate laboratory. Because one of the things that you will experience at the PUI, that your students are not going to be there for a very long time, very frequently. They often have a very limited time to do the research, so you have to keep in mind that you will be working with a constantly overturning group of people. Perhaps you can even address how you would recruit them in order to make it much more efficient and more productive. And one of the ways you could do that would be, for example, to recruit early on and recruit the students who are at, let's say, at the, maybe not necessarily at the freshman, but you can even recruit freshmen or the sophomore level, so then they can work with you for longer period of time. Summers are great time for doing research. You could tie that into your presentation as well. But the whole point is that you need to demonstrate that whatever you have done in the past, especially if you come from a research intensive institution, or you're coming out from a research intensive postdoc period, right? That you can actually translate and break down that research and possibly address a student population that has a broader range of interest. So there is a variation in between the kinds of students that you will encounter in your classroom. And it might be health science students. Could you perhaps involve, as a plant biologist, a health science student into your research? Absolutely. The skills, especially if you're working, for example, with biochemical pathways, you're doing molecular biology research, those are all transferable skills. So these things probably should somehow come through your presentation, and definitely the resource component is important, because the hiring committee would want to see that you have given it a thought of how you could use the resources that are there and what else is necessary for you to be a successful faculty member in that department.
Absolutely.
A question popped up in the chat. In the interest of long-term job stability, how do you gauge the financial stability of institutes or departments you apply to? And that's something, we have had small liberal arts colleges like Bingham South and others closing recently. That's a tough question to tackle. I'm not sure I have any insight on that.
I can add a couple of things because Alyssa, I'm hunting for if you're hunting at PUIs, this is an important question to consider, right? There's two things that are generally publicly available pieces of information that you can access that are going to be very helpful. So a couple questions you want to ask is the financial model tuition based? And some are more endowment based. Okay. So that seems like a very technical question, but it has to do with how they extract their operating budget every year. Okay. So if the university has a very large endowment, for example, in the tens or hundreds of millions of dollars, which some of these small private colleges do, odds are they can continue to use that endowment to keep the institution solvent. When you have universities that are strictly a tuition-based model, especially at the smaller ones, if there are fluctuations in the student body, it can significantly impact from year to year how much money is available. And over time, if enrollment declines, this when you see some of these institutions start to lose their fiscal solvency. Another one is state-funded institutions tend to have more stability because they are getting taxpayer dollars than private institutions that are kind of on their own. That's another thing you can gauge. And the last piece you can look at is I often see that the rate of acceptance of the undergraduate students is a good marker as well. Some institutions are looking for anybody with a pulse. If their acceptance rate is anywhere probably over 80 or 90%, that's a sign that they're taking almost anybody they can get to come fill the seats, pay their tuition, and keep the lights on. Those are the kinds of things that you can look for and evaluate. And if a school is drawing 80 to 90% of their applicants and bringing them in, they don't have much wiggle room to bring in more students in the future. So you can also look at their enrollment statistics. If they're in decline and they're already taking 80 to 90% of the students that are applying to their institution, which is not an uncommon number at some of these very small colleges, then those are some signs there may be challenges coming for that institution. And it doesn't matter if you have tenure or not. If the college or university closes, you don't have a job. Like that is a very real thing. It's a bleak time in higher ed right now, but something that you want to address and think about as well. So these are the kinds of things I also look out for when I apply to institutions as well as a job seeker in this climate with higher ed. I know that's a bleak sort of synopsis, but we do have to look out for our own careers, especially as junior faculty. Nobody's really going to look out for you when an institution goes under. It's every person for themselves at that point. So it's a really bleak and depressing thing to be a part of. One of my former colleagues was from one of those institutions that went under, and morale obviously it's very depressing. It's very bleak when those things happen. So not a place you want to be. But I don't know if you guys have other insights about that from your perspective, but that's what I look for these days in terms of stability.
Sorry.
Sorry, Jeffrey, go ahead.
The other thing you might want to look for are changes in credit rating, whether it's listed through Moody's or S&P. That'll give you kind of a snapshot of how much debt the university is holding and whether or not they're able to continue to finance that debt. So whether it's, an institution that has put up a lot of dorms recently and they've accumulated a lot of debt, but don't have enough enrollment to be able to fill all of those rooms, that's going to eventually show up in their credit rating that way. So, that might be something to look at. As far as like departmental things you could consider, most of these PUI programs are probably going to be just general biology programs, kind of big umbrellas. They're probably going to have a significant contribution to the general education package for either non-majors or science major specific introductory courses. So That's going to help to promote the long-term stability of that group. But what you really want to look for is the number of majors that they're maintaining. If this would probably be something that would not be publicly available, you would probably have to ask this question once you get to the interview stage, but get an idea of how many graduates do they have on an annual basis, or to think about it another way, what proportion of all of the graduates on campus on an annual basis are coming from that particular department. That's, to me, that might give you a sense of what the overall health of the enrollment pattern in that department might be.
Can I add to that? So that's a great point that Jeffrey made. That information you can actually find on many institutions' websites. They have institutional research data available that typically shows year per year the number of graduates and the number of enrollment and so on and so on. So you can actually prepare ahead of time and look those numbers up. But going back to William's point, you should also not forget that there are some institutions that are actually open access institutions, and ours is one of those. So even within the PUI category, there is always a very high range of variability. So the acceptance rate, for example, at an open access institution is always going to be higher than, for example, at other kinds of institutions. But there is some degree of design behind that as well. And that does not necessarily mean, that institution possibly could be more prone to financial instability. So again, the situation of, and that also influences, and that's one thing that you, through your discussions, for example, throughout your interview, could find out from future colleagues. For example, what does the nature of open access mean? For example, in terms of the student population that you will have, right? So that's very important as well.
Yeah, so that adds some nuance to that percentage enrollment bit that I mentioned. And that's another thing you can add when you're asking these questions, right? Is something like that in the works as well. Yeah, so that adds a little nuance to that too. So that's, yeah, maybe you need to ask a lot more when you get to the interview. So yeah, that's good.
And I would also recommend to try to very, very gently and diplomatically find out about the culture of the department and the institution, because it can tell you a lot about how you would fit and how you would feel in a place like that, in a department like that. I remember when I was interviewing one of my colleagues who was driving me to the airport, I asked him, so how he has been there for 20 plus years, right? So what kept him there? And he said, because this institution felt like a family.
That's it.
So, that was kind of the cherry on the top in convincing me that I actually really enjoyed being here, and people were happy at this institution.
Vision, who asked if it's possible to share the PowerPoint. Shoshana, I tried putting it in the chat room and I couldn't. But this is being recorded? Is this going to be posted someplace on Plante?
Yes, we can post this to like the PUI website and the Plante. Because it was recorded, so I can definitely.
Okay, great. So all of this should be available.
And I can put, if you send me the PowerPoint, if you want it to be posted separately also as a document with it, I can do that.
I'll send that right after then. And the other thing, before we close up, I wanted to say that a colleague of mine, Dongfang Wang at Spelman College, said that they have 2 job openings that are posted right now, and one of them would be definitely a good fit for a plant biologist. So you can check out the Spelman website. So any other questions before we wrap up? I think we've covered everything we wanted to cover. All right. Well, thank you all very much for attending our workshop, and Hope we were able to answer some of your questions and look forward to seeing your applications.
Yeah, thank you. And Jonathan, maybe we can stay in the chat for just a minute in
Yeah,
case
for
as
sure.
people file out, if they just want to ask us questions one-on-one. I can stick around for a few
Yeah,
minutes.
yeah,
if you
yeah.
guys are
I've got
busy.
time. No problem.
Great. Yeah, so we'll be in here for a couple more minutes. If anybody has one-on-one questions as well, feel free. So
So I see a new one. It is, what is the timeline of PUI application, similar to the R1?
We're doing our searches right now.
Yeah.
mhm. Yeah, I think in general, most places will post around this time of year. And that's kind of why we decided to give this presentation at this time of year as well. But in general, yeah, you'll open call for applications right around this time, maybe around Christmas, usually Christmas break, or I should say the holiday winter break. Usually those applications are closed because the committee actually has time to go through those applications once the semester ends, because we're all teaching 3 or 4 classes usually. So finally get a break to sort through everything and start usually in the winter semester, start doing initial Zoom interviews and bringing people around. Yeah. So now's the time to start putting in applications for sure, which I think is similar to R1s, right? Usually it's about the same, somewhere around that timeline. Because we want to get someone in by the start of next academic year, right? So they're teaching next August. So got to start now. Okay. All right. Any other questions, folks? All right. Thanks, Joanna. And Joanna, did we answer your question in adequate detail, or did you need more information about yours? Because there was a lot in it if you want us to unpack it more, because we have a little time. Okay, perfect. Yeah. Usually if it's tenure line too, that's the other thing you had, it's usually posted right in the listing. That one is definitely one that they advertise very aggressively. The other thing you might deal with is contract line positions, which are often either fixed terms, where they might hire you on for 2 or 3 years, or they may have a rolling contract where you renew every year for 3 years. So you can see those types of patterns emerging as well in non-tenure line positions. So those positions are also out there at some PUIs at some institutions as well. So you can keep an eye out for those also, just to be
And
aware.
sometimes if you just want to bolster your teaching credentials, you could look around locally, because a lot of the smaller colleges might be looking for adjunct professors.
Yes.
And we try to accommodate when we need people to teach like intro biolabs and things like that.
Mhm.
Very accommodating. We'll have evening courses because we know that, a lot of PIs don't want you like, leaving in the middle of the afternoon and stuff like that. So we'll accommodate your schedules and have like an evening section or stuff like that, or a Friday section. So sometimes looking for those types of adjunct positions locally can help bolster your CV.
Yeah.
And
And
teaching experience.
yeah, visiting line positions are often 1-year contracts. But for example, if you don't know if you're ready to make the full jump into a PUI, you can get a good taste of what it's like for a year, get all that teaching experience, get a taste of working with undergraduates. And then wherever you apply to next, you've got that year of a full-time professorship under your belt as additional experience. So you'll have a full year of teaching under your belt, that work with undergraduates in research, and that may give you more leverage in other applications. If you're just looking for a taste, or honestly, right, you get to the end of your PhD or a postdoc, maybe you're a little burned out on research and you want to take a break and do teaching. That's a good way to get a taste of it as well and see where you want to go after that. So those types of 1-year positions are also things you can think about. Okay.
In general, as teaching experience, many institutions look at it that way, that it's not necessarily that they are looking at past experience having taught at the PUI, but as I mentioned, I came from a research background, and I did have an education degree, but I didn't practice. But in the same time, through my research, I actually taught a variety of students in different laboratory settings and guest lectured, and everything counts really. So or having had a TA experience as a as a postdoc or a graduate student, that counts as teaching experience. So make sure that you put that in your application materials and you emphasize that.
Yeah, that all goes in. Yep. Yeah. Don't sell yourself short at all in the application at all. You can even put guest lectures in. If you guest lecture a few times in a class, that's also a good one to mention. That can always go in there as well. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Well, Jonathan and Chingeli, thank you. This was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. I hope you guys had
I
a
did
good
too.
time.
Thanks for the idea. I'm glad
Thanks.
it was just to
Yeah.
put this together.
And Joanna, yep, Joanna had some good questions. So it looks like she just left, but yeah, I had fun with this. I hope everybody else, took something insightful out of it, in that regard. But yeah, it was great to work with you guys a little bit more outside of the conference in Hawaii. So hopefully, I'm gonna try to get to Milwaukee next year. I'm working on getting funding and things like that right now. I might put in an app for some of the PUI money, and I think my DAA might have a little bit of money to throw me as well. So hopefully I can join you guys in Milwaukee over the next summer. Not quite as luxurious as Honolulu, but it's a fun town. Milwaukee's a cool town. So it's right on the
Elections will
lake
be
there.
coming up for the PUI steering committee.
Oh, okay. I see what's going on. All right.
Shoshana, thank you so much for helping us.
Yeah, thank you, Shoshana. Yep,
you.
greatly appreciated. So,
Thank
okay.
you.
And Jonathan Chingeli, let me know you guys need anything else. Like I said,
Okay.
feel free to invite me.
Well,
And
I thought this was good. Maybe we can try to do this again next year.
I don't see why not. I think we had at least, I was looking through the chat, or the room. It looks like we had at least half a dozen, maybe a dozen at some points of other applicants. We had some good questions. So, if they want to ask us more as they go through the process too, I'm happy to share my email.
Me
Following
too.
up with everybody, and help each other out here. Help help our applicants, help our junior members, right? The our postdocs and all that. Because we have a lot of great. I love going to the conference too. We have so many great people in our community, in our society, that do research and that work with plants, and they're the kind of people you want to see working right in academia and continuing to carry the torch. So anything we do to help them.
We didn't talk about this specifically, but it's so much fun to work at the PUIs.
Oh, it's a blast. I have such a good time. Yeah, exactly.
I love what I'm doing, and I hope that the young generation sees that as, there are always a lot of people who come out from PUIs. Those want to come back to PUIs. But, being in a fully research institution, they sometimes tend to have this tunnel vision, and they don't necessarily see that it's actually fun.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's a good time. Like I like that every day I do something completely different. Like that's how I feel about every day at a PUI. You're working with different students. You're doing
Never bored for sure.
something different every day. So it keeps things interesting. So
Well, this whole time I keep hearing my students in my lab. I'm just like, I want to get in there.
I gotta get in there. Yeah, make sure that you still have a lab there right behind you.
Oh no, these two, they're good.
Oh, that's great. Oh, good. So yeah, I got a couple I'm working with on Monday. So we're doing a little bit of work. Right now I'm introducing them to PCR. So we're gonna ease our way into it more. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. So okay. All right, folks. Well, anyway, I think
Great seeing y'all.
it was good
Nice
seeing
seeing
both of
y'all.
you. But yeah, I'm gonna run.
Come talk,
And
Shoshana.
yep.
Shoshana,
Yeah, thanks,
good
Shoshana.
seeing
Yep.
you.
All right, guys. Everyone have a great weekend. Yep.
Have a good weekend.
All right, thanks. Take care.
Bye-bye.